Om. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavati Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So the personality chart is what we're looking at in the final chapter of the Gita. The traits of sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva being the refined quality of a spiritual individual, that evolution. Rajas being that frenzied activity focused on the material. And tamas being that activity which comes out of ignorance or non-activity, in fact, non-thinking, wrong thinking, upside down, procrastination. So these three traits are existing in every individual, and our job as an individual to raise ourselves in our spiritual evolution is to raise ourselves out of tamas, get into rajas, if we're in rajas, to raise ourselves to sattva, and then to trans-sattva. We are all a combination of all three, sattva, rajas, and tamas. What makes us one or the other, when we might say that's a sattvic person or rajas, is the predominance. So we've got to be acutely aware of what we are and work on that trait to evolve ourselves out of it, essentially. So here he's giving a good reckoning of all the possibilities of what each part of us, where it may go, falter, or where we can evolve ourselves. So we've covered what is the sattvic knowledge, essential to have knowledge of the higher values, to get ourselves out of that rut of the mundane and the material. So sattvic knowledge sees the divinity in the diversity. A rajasic person looking at sattvic knowledge won't see that. They'll see the a rajasic person will see the diversity. They won't see the divinity. And a sattvic person will see the divinity in all diversity. The tamasic person will see a part and think that's what it is. They won't question reason. They don't have that capacity. They just see a part and think that gossip or that information is the truth. That's the misfortune of it, because we're surrounded by rajas and tamas in the society and the world of today. So we really have to make an effort to gain that knowledge of the higher values. We have to push ourselves into that sattva. So we need to do the things which take us there, like the morning study, the reflection, that open our eyes to what it really is about. Sattvic action knows what is obligatory, does obligatory actions. A rajasic actor is full of craving and desire, acts on their desire, passions, becomes victim to it. And a tamasic actor, their activities are all negative, contrary to any evolution, come out of ignorance. They're all upside down. They can't perceive actually what something is more holistic and global. It's always aimed at the individual, if that at best. At least in Rajas, there's some momentum, some material qualities going on, but they fall down when they leave people in stress, when they have all the possessions and wants and needs of the world. they still stress, so they require something to be objective in that activity of rajas to raise them to sattva, hence higher values. So the tamasic person has no view on this, no perception on this. So their actions are full of inertia. Rajasic actions are full of longing and craving. And sattvic actions are clear, with reason and thought behind them, to something more universal, global, that identification. So now we're going to look at today, actually, in fact, we've got to finish tamasic, who's a tamasic actor. So in this verse 28 that we're about to start, it kind of gives us an idea, we'll start it in a second, of what we already know, but it becomes so commonplace, the vulgarities of things, that we don't even recognize them as anything's not okay with it. We're quite comfortable because the whole of the society is bathing in tamas and think it's very normal. So it's very difficult to actually examine something like that if you're in that vicinity. It's very difficult for a tamasic actor to understand that there is something. Maybe they have a clue, they see everybody running around in terms of rajas, but they can't do it. So it really needs cultivating and nurturing from outside sources. They can't do it themselves. They don't even recognize it. So let's start 28. If there's any question. The main thing is, remember, when you're doing any of this, when you're developing yourself, it's you're developing, it's nobody else. So there's no point looking outside. The world is the world. There's pros and cons, negatives and positives. When you embark on your spiritual journey, it's you. Don't be concerned. You might have projected yourself into a rajasic or tamasic society, but it's you who's got to get out of it. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. It's you who's got to change that for yourself. You can try and change the world, but it's you who's got to change first. That's spiritual evolution, as it were.
28, Babaji.
28.
Ayukta prakritaस्तब्धः sato naishkritiko lasah vishadi dirghasutri cha karta tamasa uchyate.
Isha, you have the book. Would you like to read the verse?
Unfortunately, it was delivered to my home, and I've been away for a few weeks, so I'm back home next week. So I will. It got delivered the day after I left.
Sam, if you'd like to read the verse.
Verse 28. An actor who's not steadfast is vulgar, stubborn, deceptive, malicious, lazy, despondent, and procrastinating is called tamasika.
So, tamasic, who's a tamasic actor, not steadfast in joining ayuktaha, so is not even thinking, they're doing the opposite, if anything. They're not joining. So yukta is one who's joining with the self, with the true thoughts going that way. Ayukta is going in the opposite direction, not pursuing the self, pursuing the world at best. So it's not a physical thing, it's a mental thing. So it might appear one's after name, fame, etc. But if your focus is on the self, if the focus is on the self, you're joining. So you might appear to be doing something which is like the Gita, but if your focus is on the world, that's what it is. It's not joining, it's going in the opposite direction. So remember, it's what you are doing with yourself. Don't worry about anybody else. It's what you're doing with yuktaha, joining with your truth. So you really got to examine that. So you got to sit with yourself. It's not sitting with 10 literatures. It's sitting with knowledge, just examining that. When your mind doesn't have concentration, you go to 10 literatures, 10 different points of view. Just sit with the values and think yuktaha. So this is the opposite. So it's going away from the self. Vulgar. So a person with higher values finds it difficult to be vulgar. The values of courtesy. The value isn't with allowing that vulgarity of what may be going on to enter in their mind. They see it with a different perception. They see that negativity is just goodness bereft of a guide. They see things which are going on which are not quite right, but they see it as goodness bereft of a guide. You can't, when you don't have those thoughts of vulgarity in your mind, negative, lower values, you can't speak language which is not, it's clean-cut language. You can't speak language as foul. You don't have any reason to, and it's difficult even if you hear it around yourself, of people around you. It's difficult to actually hear that. You just move away from it. When people don't have a moral code, or when it becomes a norm that it's okay to be indulgent or accentuate things which are not positive, you just see it in a particular way, but you can't get into it. You always feel that nobody can do you any harm when you've got a higher value. So that gossip or that negativity of others, you just understand it. You don't get into it. You stay away from it. A tamasik person sees it positive to be vulgar. Sees the end of the day is better. I hear many people saying, oh, I work better at the end of the day. Not questioning why does that happen? Or they feel that getting into indulgences are better. They feel the foul language animates their conversation and it's better because it's understandable. Vulgar. You have to think about it. Stubborn. There's a difference between moral value and the understanding of other points of view. And that stubbornness, where you get stuck and attached to an idea, even if you have an idea and it's right. A spiritual value understands that you have an idea and it's right to you, but to go with the flow and dissolve your ego and to understand the whole is what your moral code is. Not to stick to your value, even if you feel it's right, is to have that flexibility. You keep the value in mind, but your expression has that flexibility. there's an adaptability to accommodate things so they run smoothly. Even if you know you're keeping your high value, it's not going with that. You allow that expression, but mentally you've got your thoughts on somewhere higher. So you don't keep stubborn with them. That just breaks things. So when in Rome, do as the Romans do, but keep your higher value. Keep a sense of proportion to your value. You could have a really good value, but you enforce it. So within the vicinity of things, you've got to think about what you've got to do. Can't be stubborn. Isha.
I didn't understand that. Sorry. So do what others are doing, but keep your own values and keep your own goal higher. I'm struggling to understand that.
So mentally, you may go with the crowd. Physically, you may go with the crowd. Mentally, you've got a higher value. So you're only going with the crowd in a certain situation where you need to be. So you're adaptable there, where as long as it's not compromising your moral code and you can physically do that, it's okay. You know, but mentally keep that moral code in your mind. You don't step out of line, but you're not stubbornly expressing it and imposing it on anybody else. Others may have their own point of view, rightly or wrongly. You don't stick to yours and bang your head to get them to think how you think. It's up to them what they think and do. You mentally keep the value. You see, there's some times where you might be amongst, you may have a value in your mind of what you think is right, but then you're amongst a group of people who don't share the same value as you. So you go with it. You may have to go with it. It may be a work scenario. It may be a family scenario. You have to go with it. But in the back of your mind, you can't stay stubborn. No, I don't do X because I'm pursuing Y. You know that's what you're doing. You keep your value with a sense of proportion. So you know you're not going to be too long in that environment. So you just let it go and you carry on. And soon you won't have to be in the environment which is compromising you. You don't keep stubborn, stuck to what you think is right. It's a difference between having that integrity and sense of proportion to your values. Say, it's like saying, I won't kill anybody. But then you have the capacity when you walk into the restaurant and you have a gun in your pocket, you don't believe in killing it, and there's one person killing everybody, you can shoot them. It's a sense of proportion. You don't have any intention to kill, but for the greater good, you can do something like that if you have the guts. So you don't have any intention. Maybe you're in an environment where you go with people. You might be, it happened to me the other day. I was with a group of people, old family friends. I needed to be in that environment. And one of them said to me, can't you consider for one day being not vegan, but being vegetarian? What she meant is the whole environment was a mixture of vegetarian, non-vegetarian, and vegan. As far as my mindset was going, I wasn't being stubborn. I can sit in the vicinity of whatever anybody wants to do. You can eat whatever you want to eat, non-vegetarian. It doesn't offend me, but I don't have to do that. But that was a compromise on my value of being vegan. I can't understand why they would do that, but I don't have to stubbornly throw it down their throat. I'm vegan. You should all eat vegan. Similarly, the person who was vegetarian was asking me, can't you be vegetarian? I won't compromise that. So it's a sense of proportion to the scenario. I can sit in the vicinity of everybody eating X, Y, Z. Those are my own thoughts. So I don't have to be stubborn about it, but I don't have to compromise either. So go with the flow. I don't have to, there's other better values they have. I don't have to look at that. So that's a very easy example to understand. There's different things. In your religion, you may have an idea where you have a value which you value, but if you get stuck with it, you become fanatical. And that defeats the point of the religion. Religion is joining back to your truth. If you're truly joining back to your truth, you'll join back to everybody's truth. It's not distinct of you've got a better religion than me or X, Y, Z. You'll find the understanding in another one's belief system. Atheist, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, whoever it is, you go with the flow because you are able to understand where they're coming from. Maybe slightly different way where you're at. You may be at a lower position or a higher position. It's not like that. It's an understanding. That's what unites. Of the common value, which releases you from being stubborn. I know about what it is, and they don't. That's stubborn. That creates wars and creates no spiritual development. So it's understanding it too. Does that make sense? So stubbornness, the lack of capacity to see another's point of view, and never in your mind can you accommodate it. So deceptive. You're cheating another for your own needs. Make it look as though it's good for them when it's really good for you. This is a tamasik actor. Malicious, intends to do others harm. Puts a fear in another. Alasa, lazy, where the mind has no ideal and there's an expectation that others will do it for you. There's no consideration of others. You're self-absorbed. Expect others to do it. Despondent. Arjuna's in a despondent state where your mind's totally depressed and despairing. It's full of desires, but you can't think straight. It saps your energy. It only spirals you downwards. Procrastination. Avoiding action without a good reason. You're not interested in getting anything done. The mind swings from here to here. The person's confused. Prevents them from operating. No clear goal. Fear of what others will say. Fear if you do this, what will happen? So you don't do anything. Wrong decision, full of regret. So instead of getting into that, is it right or is it wrong? If you're smart, you just do it. You don't allow yourself not to move. Otherwise, if you don't move, it becomes heavy. And if it becomes heavy, it builds up till it crushes you. So that procrastination. So you've got to keep moving, even if you make the mistakes, to get out of that tamas. Can't stop. Even if you're not making clear decisions. Let's read it. Sam.
A tamasika actor also has his characteristic traits. Ayukta, not steadfast, not consistent in pursuing a course of action, least of all the pursuit of self. Led by mind's whim and fancy, he has no goal in life.
So, not steadfast. Always wandering here and there. Doesn't get anything done. Let's go vulgar. Let's go to the next
one. Prakrita. Prakrita, vulgar in thought, word, and deed. A tamasika actor lacks culture, refinement, gentility, entertains low, base thought, speaks indecently, acts in a crude manner.
Next one.
Stubborn, obstinately attached to one's own point of view, feeling or action, clinging to it fanatically, pigheadedly. Pardon?
Pigheadedly.
Oh, sorry. Pigheadedly, will not yield to another's logic and reason. Deceptive. Sataha, deceptive. Deceitful, misleading, cheating another for one's selfish end. Naishkrata.
Malicious.
Malicious. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, intending evil, harm to others, expressing spite, hatred.
Next.
Alasa, lazy, slothful, disinclined to work, disregard for obligatory duty or responsibility, lack of effort in life. Ishadi, despondent, despairing, depressed, dejected, pessimistic. Dirghasutri, procrastinating, postponing, deferring action without reason, a tendency to put things off, no interest in finalizing, completing, finishing work undertaken.
Okay, so you can check all of this list in your everyday. It's very common. Tamasic actor. You see, the Rajasic actor's all over, full of passion, getting things done, but it's always with the interest of one's own self. So the tamasic actor is really interested in oneself, but not doing anything, and gets stuck and enforces that stuckness in their expression, if any at all. 29. Tim.
So we've just read this verse, which has 8 descriptions that we recognize in ourselves and in others. Is this the advantage in having a threefold distinction between sattva, rajas, and tamas, and that you can just pin it down to one, that all these are a consequence of one, of tamas?
Sorry, so what's the consequence of tamas?
Well, that this verse describes 8 characteristics of a human being.
That's what tamas.
You can just hold it in your head as one. It's tamas, it's tamasic actor.
Yeah. So if you recognize these things going on, it's just tamasic. So if you can see this in yourself at some stage, you realize, okay, let me get out of it. I don't want to remain in that tamas.
But a tamasic actor is still an actor.
Hardly.
When we were talking about, say, knowledge, jnani, tamasic jnani was not really knowledge. It wasn't jnani, was it? A tamasic actor is an actor.
Well, it's in the name of an actor, but it's not, if you're doing everything opposite to even rajas or so, if you're entertaining things which are vulgar, or you get caught with stubbornness, or you're not steadfast in anything, you've not got any focus, the eventuality is that you're depressed, or it spirals down into that maliciousness. So the only thing you can act on is actually to be malicious. So it's like very little activity going on, and if anything, you lash out to be malicious, or you're deceptive because you try to get what it is. You're trying everybody else to cater to you, to get what you want, because you're so strong in your individuality in anything. So it saps your energy totally and depresses you. So it's not really action. So if you're depressed and being deceitful, and if you're malicious, it creates that procrastination and despondency. So you're not really going anywhere. So if that's activity, it's on a very low grade activity. And if anything, it's only going into the negative abyss. So you're not really going, your activity is not really carrying you anywhere. You can purely see it when you see somebody who's addicted to something. It's totally downhill. Anything that they try to do is harmful until they get that nurturing to somewhere else, out of the tamas. It's totally sapped. So if that's an actor, it's hardly warranting the name of something great. Action.
It's a very negative list, but I'm thinking
that's
Arjuna, when Arjuna hears this, like he thinks to himself, which of these am I, Arjuna? And it's really the last two, is it not? He's despondent and he's procrastinating. But therefore ones don't really apply to what we think of as Arjuna, as a warrior.
No, and that's just to actually show you how quickly something can spiral down into something negative that you can't do anything. See, Arjuna is that princely warrior, and how quickly it got thrown down, his despondency. So he's just waiting his time, listening to that sermon to act. So tamas has got that quality that you just have to wait the time. And you slowly, if you've got somebody nurturing you, some support, you can move out. That's why when people are depressed, they can't move at all. They can't see things. You hear people, they just can't get out of bed, or they can't. And the other persons who are rajasic can't understand that. And the sattvic person can't understand how they can just focus on that. But that's what's happening. It's so full of desires, they can't see anything. Look from the trees. They can't move. So Arjuna's that in some aspect. We all have traits of this where we get stuck up. The whole idea is, how do we get out of it? So if we know about it, and if we're prepared to take this sort of knowledge in, we make ourselves aware not to get into it. You even hear some people say it's okay to get upset or be, depressed about things, or it's a natural thing that happens, this happens. It's become such a norm. It's not natural to be depressed. That's the natural state of a human being. Yet in today's society, it's very natural. So-called. It's not natural. Mental illness is not natural. It's not okay. This is trying to tell you, this is the state. This is what you're going to do to get out of it. It's very logical. But if you're in a tamasik or rajasic state, it's very difficult to hear. There's other things you might employ.
बुद्धेर्भेदं धृते चैव गुणस्तस्त्रिविधं शृणु रोचयमानमश्चेन पृथक्त्वेन धनञ्जय बुद्धेर्भेदं धृतश्चैव गुणस्तस्त्रिविधं शृणु रोचयमानमश्चेन पृथक्त्वेन धनञ्जय.
Tim, if you could read the verse.
Verse 29. The threefold division of intellect and steadfastness, according to gunas, qualities, related fully and distinctly. Do listen, O Dhananjaya. So
now we're starting from here onwards. We've covered the threefold division of Tyagi, Jnanam, knowledge, Karma, action, Karta, actor. And now we're going to be looking at Buddhi, intellect, ki, and Dhruti, without any consistency. Dhruti is steadfastness. Without any consistency, you can't achieve anything. You've got to have the Buddhi, intellect, to know what it is that you've got to be doing as well, to make that distinction. So intellect and steadfastness is what we're starting. Sattvic, rajasic, tamasic, intellect and steadfastness. He says, oh, listen to me, Dhananjaya. Dhananjaya is winner of wealth. So the pronouns to show that affection, winner of wealth. You can do it, winner of wealth. So to act, to execute any action, to be an actor, you've got to think and have that buddhi. So any progressive evolution, you need buddhi and dhruti, intellect and steadfastness, consistency of purpose. So here, from here onwards, that's all he's saying here much in this verse. From 30, we're going to have sattvic, 31 rajasic, and 32 tamasik, buddhi and dhruti. So it's so detailed to actually explain, like when we're looking at the tamasik, karta, it's got that list of things which you can ponder on in your mind when you're acting. You think, how am I doing that? To get yourself out of it. Here, same thing. Sattvic, rajasic, tamasik, intellect. So intellect is an intellect good alone. There can be grades of it. So you've got to grapple this to your soul in your activity, in your renunciation. You get a choice of what you're supposed to be doing. Let's read it. Let's read the verse.
The fifth topic, covering verses 29 to 39, defines buddhi, intellect, dhruti, steadfastness, and sukha, happiness. The preceding verses covered the triple definitions of renunciation, knowledge, action, and actor. In this verse, Krishna, addressing Arjuna as Dhananjaya, appeals to him to listen to the definitions of sattvika, rajasika, and tamasika, buddhi and dhruti. Buddhi, intellect, chooses the course of action. Dhruti, steadfastness, is maintaining action on the course chosen. Buddhi and dhruti, therefore, are integral to action. They complete the action. That explains why these two have been included in the wider concept of action. The analysis of their sattvika, rajasika, and tamasika qualities shows their distinct and separate nature. It helps the seeker to study, reflect, and direct his action on the right course through life.
Okay. So with the intellect, the whole of the philosophy is talking about how do you develop your intellect, without which nothing, that lack of discrimination between one action, one activity and another, your thoughts, your knowledge, how you perform that action. Without buddhi is nothing. So you need that buddhi to make that distinction of everything in the world and out of the world. You need that buddhi, intellect. And I don't know if you've heard of I don't know if it's a quote or a saying, one swallow a summer doesn't make. Is that quoted correctly? One swallow a summer doesn't make. You got to have consistency. You've got to have consistent focus, maybe not the right quote, but consistency of purpose in order to achieve anything. You might have the right information, you might have made the right decision, but if you don't be consistent and steadfast in your pursuit, it doesn't really amount to much in the direction. So sattvic, rajasic, tamasik, buddhi, and dhruti is what we're going to do here. So let's go to 30. Tim.
We're going through all these concepts, like we're now about to go into intellect, steadfastness, and happiness, and dividing each up into these three gunas, these three qualities. Can one divide anything up into these three qualities in a useful way? Like, you know, if I pick up a book and read it, can I say, am I reading this book in a sattvic way, or a rajasic way, or a tamasik way? Or like,
yeah, that's the whole thing. You understand what you're doing. Your approach may be sattvic, rajasic, tamasik. The knowledge, if you're picking up knowledge which is redundant to your spiritual evolution, and it's not even in your material spirit, but it's like vulgar, yeah, it's like tamasik.
So one can apply it to anything usefully.
Yeah, that's the whole idea. It's practical.
So if I smile at someone, do I smile at someone in a sattvic way, or a rajasic way, or a tamasic way?
Really, I go like, well, so that's an outward action. What backs your out action within yourself? What's your motive? Is it to get something out of them? You know, Shakespeare says you can be smile and yet be a villain. What's your intention? We'll make it sattvic, rajasic, or tamasik. So, yeah. You know, often the the subtlest things, the deepest emotions, the deepest of thoughts can't be expressed. But when you have that right intent, it's understood in the right arena. In the wrong arena, your right intent can be misinterpreted as callousness or coldness. But you keep the right intent and you'll evolve. It's nobody's business. You just keep the right intent of evolving in that sattva. Somebody else, tamasik, may misconstrue your sattvic attitude as tamasik. That's their problem. It's because they've got that then in their minds. It happens many a time. Somebody thinks that you are rajasic or tamasik because they have that in their mind. They don't know what their thoughts are. They just see an outward expression which they don't like. So you keep the right intention and make it sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. So if your smile is with the right intent, even if it doesn't look quite right, it's sattvic. If it's to unite the whole, if it's to see the divinity in the diversity, sattvic. If you smile and you want to grab something out of somebody, rajasic. But it might look sattvic. It might look appealing, but your intent's rajasic or tamasic, deceptive. It's what your intent is. In any one of them, and you only know, each one of us only knows that.
Thank you.
Makes sense.
In a sattvic way.
30.
Pravritim cha nivrittim cha karye bhaya bhaye bandham moksham cha vyavetti buddhi sa partha satviki.
So we start with sattvic intellect and vritti. So to take note of this one, this is what we want to keep cultivating, to grapple it to your soul. So that one who knows, let's read the verse. Rena, if you could read the verse.
The intellect which knows activity and renunciation, what ought to be done and what ought not, fear and fearlessness, bondage and liberation, that, O Partha, is sattvika.
So when you're consistent in your own intake of knowledge, you start to recognize the detail of what is sattvic, what is rajasic, what is tamasic. But if you're not consistent in your own knowledge of the higher values, in a rajasic state, you might think something is sattvic because it's a little bit better than what the whole, what your environment's doing. So really to get it, you've got to invest in yourself in those hours where it opens up that sattva for you. So knows the activity and the non-activity, that's renunciation. So that objectivity. So the intellect gives you the choice of the right activity, what to give up, what to take up. What's nivrittim, what's pravrittim. What ought to be done, what ought not to be done. So it's all in line with what's your spiritual evolution of what makes you join, what makes you separate. You make those distinctions, what ought to be done, what ought not to be done. So you can't really lend your intellect to somebody else. You know, a person can give you advice or you can give advice, but you can't really get somebody else to do it. You just give them advice in the way that they will prompt their own intellect to think about it and raise themselves. So you can't interfere with anybody else's mind, but you can deal with your own mind. Very often, like, it's unwise, in fact, but there's the statement, what the wise don't unsettle the minds of the ignorant, meaning you don't go and rattle others and tell them what to do. You can put knowledge forward, and those who want to pick it up will pick it up. but you can't enforce anything. So sattvic intellect knows what's to be done, but there's no imposition on anybody else what they should be doing. So some areas in yourself may be strong in your sattva, and there may be other areas where you may be quite weak. Maybe not able to hold it with that higher value. So whatever your chosen field of activity, whatever your swadharmic nature is, if you can pick that up, is less likely that you get confused in what you're supposed to be doing. So that intellect is able to focus on something bigger of the spiritual nature than the material evolution, as it were. So knowing what ought to be done and what ought not to be done. So once you've got a clear-cut path, you stick to what that is. That intellect sticks to that ideal, makes that distinction. There's no noise within you, no stress, as it were. So if you choose a life of renunciation, what does renunciation mean? We've been pursuing this an awful lot. What do we mean by renunciation? Anyone? Vidya? One word? 2 words? Liberal 1 sentence?
Taking up higher values.
Taking up something higher. What's another single word for taking up something higher?
A vision.
Provision, did you say?
A vision.
A vision. So you have an ideal, a vision, something in mind. Anybody else? Taking up something higher, a vision, growth. So never be frightened of this word, renunciation. It doesn't mean giving up everything. It's actually taking up something which will help you, a vision of something bigger, universal, growth. We're all after growth in some form or another. Sattvic intellect allows that. 4 a.m., 4:30. Can't do 4:30, do 5. Can't do 5, do 5:30. Can't do 5:30, do 6. Do whatever you can then, but do something which builds that study of the higher values, the reflection, and enables you not to fear things in life because you know what ought to be done. So there's no bhaya, fear. What ought not to be feared, you can do, and what ought to be feared in the tamasik side, you drop. You push yourself to drop the lower values because you've got something bigger to aim for. So you've got that clarity. So few persons go to the end of reasons for their wants because they don't understand them clearly. And actually, when they do, they don't really understand the consequences if it's a rajas. So you can't lend your thinking to others' capacities, and you can't resolve their fears, but you can resolve yours. So if there's a clear stream of thinking with reason, without fear, you can hold your head up high with that knowledge which is taken in liberally. The reason's not lost along the way to some dead habits that you have or superstition that you cling on to. The sattvic intellect takes care of what you fear and what ought not to be feared. Puts it in perspective. The universal values you don't fear, you want to participate in, and the self-centered values of procrastination. What is it? The laziness, the despondency, the maliciousness, deceptiveness you fear. So you try and keep yourself away from that. You understand not to court your malefactors, and you dare to court your benefactors. Malefactors sometimes appear like people who will service whatever you're doing, but they're actually tamasik, and they're in it for themselves. Benefactors looking at the interest of the whole, and they will fuel the bigger causes. So what is feared and what is not to be feared? What is to be feared and not to be feared? It's an understanding with sattvic intellect of what that is. So you don't build up that frustration of getting into that part as the whole. The person who fears does that. So if we're thinking of our own interest, you do that. So obligatory duty removes your fear. So you've got to suss out what that is. Bondage and liberation. We're going to have to go through this next week again. Let's stop here. And let's go through it clearly. You can read through Sattvic Intellect and Dhruti for next week. Hari Om.